guys, welcome back to Elephants in the Room. I am here with my very, very good friend, Miss Emily Smith, known as one of the most amazing and genuine and honest Christian influencers I know. Actually, not Christian influencers, influencer / actor / entrepreneur / real estate agent / everything.
Yeah.
You do it all.
We do it all.
So she's one of my dear friends. I've actually known her for a really long time, and we're going to get into like how we know each other and stuff. But we've wanted to film together forever, and we just haven't done it.
I know.
And now it's happening.
It's happening.
So we're excited. We're going to talk about a lot of stuff, but let's first start with how we met.
Yes.
So it's actually a funny story because David knew you before. And how did you and David meet again?
We met on TikTok.
Okay.
I remember he followed me and I was like, I don't know who this person is.
Right.
But I loved his videos because it was so real, and it was at the point where he was screaming in the camera.
The POV.
Yeah, the
You were
POVs.
past the POV phase.
I was in the screaming in the camera phase.
Yeah.
I was like, okay. And then, so we connected, and then I think you guys had just started dating. And then I had also connected with you on TikTok, and then
you followed me, I think, and then had like DM'd me. And I think David had also mentioned you and talked about you, and he was like, oh, like, this is my friend Emily, like she's Christian, and she does social media and stuff. And I was like, oh, cool.
Yeah. And then I had just started dating my boyfriend, now husband, at the time.
Yeah.
And Nicole started dating David. So they came to LA. Was it your first time in LA?
Yeah, it was my first time in LA. This girl took my Erewhon virginity, guys.
I did.
It's
and
a big deal.
I have pride in that, honestly.
I got the chicken pot pie. It was so good.
Yes.
And we had our first LA experience. David had been to LA a couple times, but yeah, I think we had like followed each other for a bit. We had DM'd, and then me and David came out to LA to just visit. He was here for music or something, and then we ended up going on a double date.
Yes.
And it was so cutie and fun.
It was so cutie. You were like baby.
We were babies.
Yeah. I think David was 19.
David was 20.
Yeah.
He was 20 and I was 20.
Was he 20? I think he was 19.
He was 20 when we met. Yeah, he had just turned 20.
Okay.
And then I was 21, almost 22.
Got it.
Yeah, and we hung out. We went to Erewhon.
Yes.
We walked on Venice Beach, right?
Yeah.
Not Venice Beach, but like...
We walked on the boardwalk.
We walked on the boardwalk, went to Erewhon, hung out.
We went to the observatory.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we did all the things.
We did all the things.
Well, Emily's actually what would you call an LA?
I'm from LA, so I'm an LA native. I'm an LA native, so I'm born and raised, and I love showing people LA because it's like
the place.
Such an interesting environment, and whenever someone comes to LA, I feel that it's like a supernatural experience for them almost.
Yeah, it is.
Because it's so new and you see it so often. For me, I lived there my whole life, so I know every place. So it's not that cool for me, but when I show people, I'm like, yes, it is.
It is cool. Yeah. I love LA. The first time I came, I was like, this is like what dreams are made of. Like, it's so beautiful.
You're like, we'll be back.
And pretty. And and then we were. And yeah, it's funny. I actually introduced her. I don't know why I said Christian influencer. That's triggering for both of us because we both have trauma with that. That was a bad intro. Yeah. She's not a Christian influencer.
I dipped out of that.
Yeah,
I love Jesus though.
She does love Jesus, and I do too. But I don't think either of us claim Christian influencer.
I just don't agree with that too much.
We can get into that too later. But
I was just talking about this with Tyler actually.
Yeah,
I find that whole thing very interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. We've talked about it before. We have I feel like we were both part of kind of that first wave.
Yes, in 2020.
Yeah. Me in a much smaller way, you in a bigger way.
Yeah.
But we both kind of leaned out of that now, and gotten a lot of hate for it and stuff.
Yeah.
And I think I know people question my faith and what I believe in and stuff.
It was like anytime I didn't post about God, people would comment being like, are you still following Jesus?
Right.
Obviously, yes, I was. But it's such a show. To me, at the point where I was at, I would feel like I was posting just to keep up with that type of content. Yeah. When I didn't feel like God was actually having me do that, which is really tough. And I'm sure a lot of people struggle with that. It's like this weird balance because at that point it almost becomes your job. Yeah. You know?
100%. Yeah, I definitely...
Yeah, it's a whole other topic.
No, I know. I talked about it a little bit in my... you guys know in the episode, my like church trauma episode, I talked about that. Coco Suzumi.
But yeah,
like I totally felt that same way when I had my Bible videos start like blowing up and stuff. And then it was kind of like I felt this expectation, like I have to post one every day. And at the start I felt like it was great and it got me in the word, and then it got to a point where I was like, okay, like I don't feel like, I feel like I'm forcing this out of me rather than like having the Holy Spirit move. And I was like, if I'm going to build a platform off of God, I'm going to have to be really careful what I do with it. And also like, there's just so much that goes into it, but I think generally it is bad to use God for your gain.
Yes.
And I think there's a lot of people who don't, and they do it in an amazing way. And I think there is a space for Christian influencers, and there needs to be, because the gospel needs to be spread. I just don't think that I'm the person that is supposed to do it.
Yeah. I feel like the Lord uses people, what you're saying, in so many different ways. And I think that the way that I was specifically being used, maybe you were, it didn't fit with what I knew God was calling me to.
Right.
And I'm an actor. I'm in LA. I'm in the industry.
Yeah, that's what I should have introduced you as.
No, I'm serious, but you're in the music industry. And so I think we feel more called to be almost like undercover. Light in the darkness. And I think at the time, I know for me, I was just really posting content and I really wasn't thinking about it.
Right.
And then when I grew a following based on that, that's when it started tripping me out, because I would go places and people would be like, oh my gosh, like I'd go to church and people would be like, oh my gosh, I know you. And then I would feel really odd.
Yeah.
It was hard for me. I didn't understand, because I was like, no, it's Jesus, go to Jesus.
Right.
It's not me. And it just didn't sit well for me personally. Like, I think that culture of famous pastors or Christians or Christian influencers, I see it all the time. I mean, I go to church in LA with these people. Yeah. Some of them aren't great people, to be honest, in real life, and some of them are. So it's that's also a whole separate conversation. But for me, I was just like, I have to focus on my relationship with the Lord, who I am truly with the Lord. And that was more important to me than building a platform. Right. So. Yeah, and I think. And some people are not going to see that and understand that. And not everyone's going to understand your relationship with the Lord. Yeah. So it's kind of like you just.
Because it goes both ways. I see how people could be like, well, if you grew your platform off of this, like, so it's hard. I see all perspectives, but I feel like generally God speaks to you and through you when he wants to on his timing. And I rather have a platform or a podcast that is, and same with what you do, like that isn't necessarily like a Christian thing. That doesn't mean I'm not going to talk about Jesus.
And God's not going to be in everything you're doing.
And when I do feel like he's calling me to, I will. Like I've prayed multiple times on episodes and stuff, but it's not like a Christian podcast. But I do it when I feel like I'm called to, So, but it's controversial, but that's a whole nother subject.
Could be a whole separate podcast.
But what I wanted to talk about today with Emily, which we kind of talked a little bit about, was we both come from pretty traumatic and adverse childhood experiences. You guys know my story, drug addict parents, the whole thing. A lot of chaos, divorce. I have a lot of baggage, a lot of trauma. You guys know that. That's nothing new. Now, Emily, on the other end, do you want to give us like a very quick summary of kind of your childhood? Yeah. And a little bit about your early relationships before you met Tyler, your now husband?
Yeah. So I feel like a lot of my early relationships stemmed from my dad stuff, because I believe that the first male that a woman loves is their dad. So I was super close with my dad growing up. We were best friends, and my dad also struggled with addiction. He was addicted to prescription pills, and I really didn't know he was addicted until I was like 13. But there was just he was very addicted to them. Like he was high a lot, and it was really traumatic. And so I grew up in that environment with kind of, my parents were still together, but they didn't like each other, and they struggled because of my dad's addiction. But my dad loved me a lot, and so I felt like, because I didn't know the Lord, I sought love and validation in relationships when I first started dating. So I lost my virginity when I was 16, which I did not want to do. I guess the backstory for me is my testimony of finding God, truthfully, because I did not grow up in the church. I'm Jewish. And then my family moved me to like a suburb and started taking me to church. And I did like church choir and stuff. I did Young Life. And I started reading the Bible, but it didn't sit with me. it's kind of that verse that talks about when the word falls on, it's not on solid ground. So I knew the word, but it really didn't sit with me. And I had some convictions, like I wanted to wait till marriage. But then I started dating this guy when I was 16, and I told him I wanted to wait till marriage and all this stuff. And then, or I wanted to not have sex. I didn't desire it. And he was just pressuring me, like, you need to have sex. We need to have sex. And we dated for like 2 to 3 months. It's so weird talking about it, because thinking about it now, I was literally a baby. So I don't know how old you are that's listening to this, but you might feel like you're old or something at 16, but you are literally a child. Yeah. I was a baby. I had no idea what was going on. I really didn't know anything about my body and stuff like that. So anyways, that relationship, I didn't tell you this, but he ended up actually cheating on me. And I didn't find out until after we broke up. He broke up with me. He ended up getting with this girl, and then he would text me while he was dating this girl, and he's like, well, she will have sex with me, she's so good in bed. I'm like the 16-year-old, and I'm like, what? Oh, well, you know, maybe if I have sex with him, then he'll get back with me, because I just was so traumatized by him breaking up with me and all this stuff. So that's kind of my relationship with men and guys, like at that point, was if I give them sex, like they'll love me, and they'll see me. And so I ended up losing my virginity to him. Super traumatic experience, honestly. I truly believe, and this is what I talk about a lot, or what I used to talk about, is I resaved myself for marriage, because I think sex is such a sacred experience that you should keep with someone that is in that same, you know, 100%. Context or whatever. So there's no shame if you don't wait or you didn't or whatever, but that was just my experience. But yeah, so we ended up breaking up, and then I ended up actually dating his best friend, which that was a 3.5-year relationship. Got it. Yeah. And so we dated from, I think I was 17 till 21. And that was, I feel like at the beginning it was pretty normal, but very codependent, constantly talking, always together, no identity. I lost all my friends, wasn't close with my family, just completely separated. And again, I think it all stemmed from this childhoodness of like not knowing my identity, not knowing God, and just putting my identity in men. Yeah. And doing anything he wanted, honestly. And about a year into that relationship, which I told Nicole, he ended up cheating on me with my best friend, which was super traumatic. And I was in the room. I could kind of go into it, but we were basically, I mean, at that point in my life too, I was like doing drugs. I was going to raves. I was very openly drinking and taking prescription pills, and stuff like that, because I thought that was what was normal, because that's what I grew up with. Right. And that's what the people around me were doing. And so, yeah, one night we were hanging out, me, him, and my best friend, and I fell asleep on him. And then my best friend walked around the room and laid on the other side of him, and they kind of started hooking up while I was like laying with him. Oh my gosh. And I was traumatized, but I kept my eyes closed because I wanted to see how far they would actually go, until I woke up and kind of freaked out. And so I ended up freaking out and like kicking her out of my house. And then I ended up staying with him for 2.5 more years, because I just really didn't know what love was. You know, I felt that if I left this guy, then that was my whole world. My whole identity was always in whoever I was dating. Yeah. And so we ended up staying together. And then the reason that we broke up was because 2.5 years later, the girl texted me and sent me all these texts that he was texting her at like 2 in the morning, saying like, hey, I want to meet up with you, you know, whatever. So anyways, that was kind of my testimony with relationships. And then it was just hard. I felt like I carried that. And then I went into the hookup culture, and I carried that idea of, oh, if I have sex with a guy, he'll stay with me. Right. And I just was really seeking love and validation in men. And at that time I was like, okay, I'm 21. I was working out. I knew my body could get men. I would go to bars and just be like, you know, I'm cute, and if I throw myself at someone, they're not going to say no. Yeah. And so I kind of lived in that lifestyle for, I don't know, 8 months. And I would get into these little short-term flings with guys, like 3 or 4 months, and then we would have, do that, and then they would just ghost me.
Yeah.
And I was like, what is wrong with me? Why can't I keep a man? It's very interesting. And then, long story short, I ended up dating a guy who was a believer, or he was kind of like lukewarm. And he started taking me to church. And when I would go to church, I would just cry my eyes out. And I didn't know why. I couldn't really understand the gospel or who Jesus was, but I would just cry. And then I would leave and I would feel convicted about stuff. It was very odd. I was like, why are we doing this? Why are we doing that?
No.
But I wasn't living out, I wasn't saved. I don't know if I was saved, but I was feeling convicted. But then I was, having sex and then going to church, having sex in the morning and going to church at 11. And so anyways, he ended up breaking up with me, which was honestly glory to God. And I finally felt like it led me to a place that I could go to church, because I wasn't doing it for a guy. I wasn't just going to find Jesus because the guy wanted me to go. It gave me that separation. And as soon as I went to church on my own and I read the Bible for the first time in since I was, 13, I've just felt the Holy Spirit. I felt the words of the Bible kind of jump off the page. It's living, it's alive. Anyways, I just ended up giving my life to God, and I felt like that was the first time that I felt loved and seen and known. And I know that sounds so cheesy, but it really, you're going your whole life trying to fill this hole in your heart of, I don't feel loved, I don't feel enough, I don't, and I sought out different things. I did yoga, I did inner healing, I did meditations, I did new age stuff, and it just was never satisfying to my soul. I truly believe that Jesus is the satisfying thing that our soul is craving. And so I ended up meeting Jesus and reading through the scriptures, and it just changed my whole idea of love and how to be loved and what God says about love and what the Bible says about marriage and dating and all this stuff. And so I just remember when I got saved, the first words God spoke to me, I got saved, I went home, I repented to my mom, because that's a whole other story. I hated her my whole life. And then I was like, I'm so sorry. And then I just remember the Lord saying, you're not having sex until you're married. And he was like, you lost your privilege. That was what I heard.
It's like, you pushed it too far.
No, and I was like a new believer, it wasn't, I think sometimes people grow in God and grow in hearing God, but I remember that so loud in my head. I can still hear God saying that. And I think that's what kind of took the Lord, but that word that God gave me allowed me to go to where I was able to reweight, because I had done it before and it's so hard to reweight. I don't know. So that was it. And then I feel like there's a lot of other things, and I'll just quickly say this is and we can talk about relationships and go deeper into that, but I just thought it was interesting because my virginity was taken from me super traumatically. And then all the guys I dated, I took their virginities. So, and we can talk about this, but I took my first boyfriend's virginities, and then I took my ex's virginity, and I was seeking out to take virginities. It was weird because mine was taken so traumatically. I don't want to get spiritual with it, but it could be a weird, I don't want to get too spiritual with it, but I was I honestly felt like it was a demon. I truly was something came over me, and then I was seeking to do that to other people. And when I met Tyler, he was a virgin, and I feel like the Lord almost redeemed that for me. That area of my life.
That's beautiful.
And he was a 28-year-old virgin that's really good looking.
You're like, wait a minute,
this is not normal. And people were like, are you sure he's good? I'm like, no, he's good. I promise.
You're like, I swear. That's so crazy.
I feel like that was just a testimony that God actually had over my life from a very young age. And it was tainted and distorted, and that idea of sex and love was distorted so much. So being with Tyler was just
very redeeming.
Very redeeming.
I love that. I gotta write that down too. So good. It's so crazy, guys, because when you have a friend and you just feel so understood by them. It's just crazy because, well, first of all, thank you for sharing all that. I mean, that's a lot. And I know that a lot of people resonate. And there's so many parts I want to dissect with you. But But I think it's so crazy that God brings people into your life that may be walking in a completely different season of life than you, but they're, you know, in the same way in such a similar season, and they have so many of the same struggles, even if they have a different story than you. Like, our stories are so different. But there's obviously a lot of similarities, and I think there's a lot of similarities in the way that we have been traumatized and the effects of that. Even though our stories are so different. So so yeah, just to kind of touch on some of those points. So, grew up, your dad's an addict. Him and your mom don't have a very good relationship. You love your dad. That's kind of where you first put your love, and you don't really know the Lord. And then you kind of walk into the slippery slope of unhealthy relationships. But to you, that's just all that you knew. And then you find Jesus, you find your identity, and it kind of shifts everything for you, which I know for me is a very similar story. I think that, and we talked a little bit about this, but yeah, I mean, when we're kids, like, what we see, that's what we know. And so that's just what we assume is, right? So it's like whatever you witness is what you think. You think that's how things work. And so it's just crazy to me, because I think that, you know, there's a couple shows that do a really good job of this. I don't know if you guys have seen Made on like Netflix. Have you ever seen that? It's about this girl, and her mom is married to an abusive man, and, you know, he's an alcoholic, and and then she ends up doing the same thing, and it's like kind of this trickling effect. And yeah, it's just like, it's really hard to break the generational trauma of unhealthy relationships. Like, it's really hard. They always say, like, oh, like, you'll marry someone like your dad, or you'll marry someone like your mom. And it's crazy how true that was. I didn't realize how true that was until I did that. And I literally married someone just like my dad, and I was like, oh shoot. No, it literally is like a curse. It's like so deeply rooted in you. You like think
it's normal too.
You think it's normal, and it's so not normal, but it's so hard to break those chains. And so there's a couple of things I want to touch on, but I do want to say this. I think one thing that will be special about this episode, and that I really want to talk about, is obviously me and you met in this new season of life when God brought us these new people, like David for me, Tyler for you. And it's crazy because they're both great men. And I do really believe this, and I want to clarify this just real quick before we get into all of this. I believe that there's toxicity within any and every relationship. Like when people say like, oh, I went from a toxic relationship to healthy relationship, like I believe that you create a healthy relationship and it takes a lot of work. I think that we all have things. I think that we all have traumas that make us think certain things. So I don't want to glamorize or unglamorize our relationships or our partners, because they are not perfect. They are not perfect. It's not like, oh, I'm in a healthy relationship now, it's perfect. It's like, no, there's toxicity within every relationship, and also you have to create it, especially when you come from trauma. And so all of that to say, we were both in very toxic relationships where I think we found our identity and our worth within those relationships. And then, you know, God finds us, he meets us, he shows us a new identity, and that our identity is in him. And we're able to, you know, have a sense of self-love, but not from a conceited way, from a way of understanding that we are loved by God. That's enough. That's where it comes. We don't need to fill that deep wound with anyone else. And then we're able to love from a much more pure, healthy place. But it's crazy because I feel like, I always say this, but I think being in and staying in a toxic relationship not only is a habit and it's learned, but it's also a form of self-hatred.
That's intense.
And you don't love yourself enough, you know, to get out of a relationship that, you know, isn't serving you. Or you
don't think you can have
You don't think you have enough value.
You don't believe in what love can, like what true love can be like. You know what I mean? Because I know that was for me. I felt trapped, and well, if I break up with this person, well, then I don't know what's gonna happen, and that's scary.
And I think it comes down, like you said, to an identity thing, and I think putting your identity in a relationship, and I think there's a healthy, you know, when you get married or when you're in that committed relationship that's leading to marriage, whatever it is, like there is a sense of you're building a life together. There is a trust that you put into it, but I think generally it is unhealthy to put your identity in a relationship.
Absolutely.
And you have to know your identity outside of the relationship. But there was a couple of things I wanted to talk on, and I was saying all of that to say one thing that I've noticed with me and Emily is through every season that we've kind of gone through when we first started dating Tyler and David to now, obviously you're married. Me and David are not yet, but soon. Wink. But to see that we've gone through a lot of similar struggles.
Totally.
And we've sat down at dinner before, you know, me, you, and David and Tyler, or sometimes separately, and we'll start to share these things, and we're like, oh, wow, like we have really similar personalities. They have really similar personalities. We kind of have similar issues, different.
Yeah.
And it all kind of stems from a place of, I think for me and you, a little bit of relationship anxiety.
Totally. Yeah.
And trust issues that we have from our past relationships.
Absolutely.
That we've kind of now moved into our relationships now. And it's interesting because Tyler and David are so pure. So like obviously walking out of a marriage, I'm not a virgin.
Yeah, I have stuff I want to say about this, by the way. And Tyler would say he's not pure, and I agree with that. He's not. He did stuff too.
Well, okay, yes.
I'm cutting what our conversation was because I was thinking about it, and I want to keep hearing what you're saying, though.
No. Say what you're going to say.
I think that like what you're saying is that every relationship has
toxicity.
Stuff. Yeah, and it's not. It's. For me and Tyler, it was like, I thought, oh, he's so pure, he's a virgin. And that's literally all my comments on my TikTok videos was like, you're a WHORE and you
could say it.
You're a train wreck and you've been screwed 1,000 times, whatever, which I haven't. But even if my number was 5, 10, 2,000, it doesn't matter. Like it's redeemed by Christ.
No, but
then
that
they're
is
like,
a lie.
Tyler's the virgin and he waited for marriage and he's pure and he's good.
Right.
Okay, well, he also struggled with porn.
Right.
And he also did stuff as well. So like Jackie Hill Perry talks about this, her husband, I saw it on a podcast, and they're like, everyone's always on Jackie Hill Perry, well, she was gay or this or that, but they never talk about how he slept with multiple women. And so it's almost... And
it's kind of like glamorizing or villainizing.
Yes, one person. Yes.
And I think too, I think that that's a lie. I think that's a big problem with women, is that when we come from any sort of background with any sort of trauma, or I guess you could say like a toxic relationship, or you know, if you've been sexually active or whatever it is, it feels like you are damaged goods. It feels like your baggage, you're all these things. And that's just a lie.
And it is a lie, but also, and it's sad because that's also the culture. And this is a side note from, I want to hear what you keep saying, but I feel that I get a lot of DMs from women and men saying, oh, my boyfriend doesn't like, he can't see past my sin, or guys DMing Tyler, like, how'd you see past, you know, all the stuff she did, or vice versa. And there's this culture of, if a woman has had sex, then they're damaged, but if a guy has, then they're not.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's just
like a whole another conversation.
Yeah, that's a whole can of worms to unload. A whole can of worms. But yeah, I mean, it's all wrong and it's sad, and I think it's because of, I mean, there's so many factors, but I think just, you know, society standards and just all these things, it's really sad how it's all laid out. But it's not like that.
It's not.
But I think that because of, you know, what we went through as children.
Yes.
You just believe that your value and your worth comes from how loved you are, which is one of the bullet points I put down. And I know you'll agree with me on this, but I just want to remind anyone who's watching this, like, your worth is not defined by if someone chooses to love you or not.
Yes.
And if you're good enough for them to choose you or to love you, like, I 1000% felt like so rejected, and like, I'll never be anyone's first choice. I'll never be good enough. Like, and then I got married and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm someone's first choice. And then I wasn't.
That happened. Yeah.
And it literally feels like you can never be enough, and that you're never enough because but the thing is, you'll never be enough for someone who doesn't, you know, who isn't healthy. And also sometimes it just doesn't work out with someone, but I feel like we do put such a pressure on ourselves of like, oh, like, if you're not in a relationship and you're single, or if you get broken up with or whatever, like, or if you get cheated on, like, that means there's something wrong with you.
Yeah.
And I know everyone says that, but like, obviously there's not.
Yeah.
But it's just sad how our worth gets so tangled up in all of that.
Tangled, yeah.
Yeah. And it's hard. And that did happen for me. I know it happened for you.
Yeah, it happened for me.
And then you're kind of like, your self-esteem, like, I know after my marriage, like, my self-esteem was so low.
So low.
And that's when I found Jesus. And obviously he helped me love myself in a different way, because I didn't love myself because a man chose me or because I was desirable or whatever. Like, that's not why I felt valuable, is because I was like, oh, it's because I'm loved and created by God, and I'm good enough with who I am and what I am, and I don't need anyone's approval.
Yeah.
You know, I don't need a man to make me feel whatever. But I think that part of that just stems from, like, the trauma of not seeing healthy relationships in your life, and also not knowing Jesus.
Yeah.
Which is like a whole nother thing. But what I wrote down that I really want to talk about was, we obviously have gone through similar struggles.
Yes.
And I don't want to glamorize our partners or not, because I do agree, like, it does take two willing people to have a healthy relationship. And I think more God just gave us an opportunity to have a healthy relationship and a loving, a God-honoring relationship. But
like,
it does
Tyler
take
and David
work.
are definitely more, and I want to get back to that topic, like, of just almost like I was Tyler's first girlfriend. I think you were David's really like first relationship. Like his first
kind of real relationship. He did like one girl in high school.
Same. And so I think that's really what you were getting at with that, is that we were coming in all traumatized. We're like, you're gonna cheat, you're gonna be horrible, and Tyler and David are just like, no, I just love you. And it's hard to accept that.
Well, yeah, I think it's hard because it's really tricky to not carry your baggage into your new relationship. And not just your baggage, but, you know, it is very normal, even outside of relationships, when you have trauma, you can get triggered by things that remind you of that trauma. So it's normal. Triggered. No, triggered.
I love it.
So, like, if something happens in your relationship that maybe isn't okay and isn't good, it may not be to the same degree of what happened to you, like, but it can still make you feel triggered. Like, it's like that's what's crazy about, like, the brain and stuff, like with PTSD. Yes. Which I think you totally have if you've ever been cheated on. Totally. Or have been in a really abusive or toxic relationship, which, raise my hand, I have, I know you have. Yeah. And when you start to feel a similar way or something happens, it takes you right back. Yeah. And you're like, oh, I'm going to be cheated on. Yeah. Oh, he doesn't love me. He doesn't love me. Oh, like, and it's just your brain. All it's doing is it's pulling from a familiar memory. Like, like, that's what you know. That's what you know to be true, because that's what you've physically seen. So for your body, it's just making a prediction based on what it already knows. Yep. Which, like, makes sense. Like, there's nothing wrong with that. But obviously you can't walk in that. The body does keep score. It does. So kind of like what you were saying, it is tricky to walk into these new relationships with these men that obviously just want to love us. And again, neither of them are perfect. Yes. We're not going to sit here and say that they are. No. But they came into the relationships with pure intentions. Totally. And they both love Jesus. Yes. And just want to love us. And we tend to overcomplicate that. Yeah, and put timelines and ways of being. Because that's another thing too with Christian. Yeah. The Christian world is also so weird because, how do I explain this? I love Jesus and I love the church, first of all, but I do think that some of the Christian culture can be really dangerous in regards to relationships, and that there just has to be these certain ways of dating. Or if, you know, I had seen some big influencers, Christian influencers, sorry I say that, Christian influencers, because I don't know, that talk about
Sorry. God, so sorry. I remember seeing this one thing. It actually really pissed me off when I was dating Tyler, and it was this girl, and she was saying, oh, if your boyfriend struggles with porn, you should break up with him. He's not ready to be married, or this or that, or this. I'm like, okay, well, what? First of all, love is a choice. People sin. Yeah. I'm not perfect either. Like, I had pride. I was still struggling with lust when Tyler and I were dating. He struggled with lust in a different way. And if I would have just broken up with him because he struggled with porn while we were dating, then I wouldn't be married right now, and he wouldn't be freed. So I'm not saying you should marry someone who's actively, you know, watching porn or whatever, or I don't know, everyone has different things, but to just completely write someone off, or oh, this guy isn't gonna marry me within a year. I had that mindset. If Tyler doesn't propose in a year, then I'm breaking up with him. He obviously doesn't know what he wants, and he doesn't, you know, these weird. I
was just like, if David's not sure he wants to marry me in like a month, I'm not wasting my time. I'm not going through heartbreak again.
And I talk with I'm not going to name her name, but I talk with somebody about this, and it's just, you got to get out of the mindset of it's an anxious, and we were talking about this, I had really bad anxious attachment of just, oh, well, if it's not this way, or if you're not like this, then must not be from God. I'm like, no, that's not true. There were so many. Also, an anxious attachment stems from like you trying to protect yourself.
Yes. I'll reword that. I don't know if that's what I don't think that's what an anxious attachment stems from, but like it's an insecure attachment style in the way that you don't feel secure, and so you're just anxious. Yeah. And so you want to try to control and like, you're trying to protect yourself. And that's why it's sad is that all these things stem from trauma. But they're not good, obviously.
No, they're not. And it's traumatizing to a relationship. And thankfully, I had a partner that worked through it with me, and I worked through his stuff with him. But I mean, being anxious and fearful, like, of how our relationship was going to go, or this way or that, it was very traumatizing for us when we were dating. I don't think anyone knew that, obviously, publicly, but I definitely struggled with, are you cheating, are you doing this, are you, you know, because that's what you knew. That's what I knew, from your checking last his phone here and there, which now I never do. And if I ever do that, ever want to do that, I just turn it off, because I trust him enough to tell me. And also trust has to be given, which is scary, because it's like you're choosing to trust someone knowing that you could get hurt, but you can't control it. You know, it's like if someone chooses to cheat on you, they choose to cheat on you. It's so true. Which sucks. Yeah. But it's like there's nothing you can do to prevent it from happening. Yeah, and I had a couple like interesting incidents. Again, I feel like this podcast, I love God so much, so it's hard for me to not talk about God specifically. Please. In my relationship, but there was a couple times, and Tyler would testament to this as well, when we were dating, and the Lord would really, he would actually show me stuff. I would be on Tyler's phone, and he'd get a text from somebody that I'm like, hey, why are you texting this person? I would never have to really look for it. The Lord would show me it. And I think I not only trusted Tyler, but I had to put my trust in the Lord. Amen. In my relationship of like, God was going to tell me and show me the things that I needed to see and I needed to know, and vice versa for him, for us to be able to, for me not to shame him and be like, you suck, you're horrible, but for us to take that opportunity and say, why are you doing this? Why are you like this? What is coming up here? Yeah, like actually dissecting it rather than accusing and shaming. And that's tough, you know, and that's it's taking myself out of it and realizing, like you're saying, everybody has trauma, everybody has stuff. Yes. Why is he doing this? And I never really did that. And there's always a root. And there's always a root. And for us to get to that root and understand it, and for him not to have shame or hide it, or for me not to be like, you're attack him, and just pray about it and bring it to the Lord and just be honest with each other. And I think creating a safe space, I never had in any relationship of, we're safe, we want to be together, we're choosing to be together, and we want to grow. And so whatever comes up in between that, like, let's bring it to each other. And work it out. And that's not the easiest thing to do, trust me, but love is a choice. And I think I know for men and for women as well, but for men, they carry a lot of shame.
Yeah.
And I think for Tyler to feel that he had a safe place to talk to me, and probably David as well.
Yeah.
Then it allowed those conversations to come about of like, hey, I struggled with this the other night, or whatever. Sorry, throwing the ball.
For anyone who's listening to the podcast and isn't watching, guys, we're playing. Coco is obsessed with fetch. She won't stop playing it. So if you hear a ball that keeps going, it's because we're throwing the ball.
And she's like coming up to us growling. She's like, throw my ball.
Yeah. She's a minion.
I mean, funny.
It's interesting you say that, because like I said, it's so funny. I feel like that's what I love about doing this podcast and talking to people, is it's so crazy how often when you start to share your story and share vulnerabilities, or you're vulnerable about things you've gone through, how many similarities you experience. And that is like very similar. Me and David experienced, like because I had been so traumatized by my last relationship, I had such high standards, and I was so hard on David and expected like him to be perfect. And then when he wasn't, I was like, he doesn't love me. This isn't going to work out. And it was like, no, I had to allow, number one, I had to start with a clean slate. Like when you're walking into a new relationship after a toxic one, you have to give them an opportunity to start fresh with you.
Yes.
Like you cannot bring in what's happened to you in the past into it. And if you start to see yourself doing that, like you have to take it up with the Lord, take it up with a therapist, whatever you need to do. Like you need to make sure that you're giving them an opportunity. Like I remember my therapist used to always be like, Nicole, this is not your ex-husband. This is not your last relationship. Like
that's
you need to treat this differently. This may feel similar to you, but it's different. David's heart is different. His intentions are different. And David is not perfect. And I've said that before, and I'm not either. And he's made mistakes, and I've made a lot of mistakes in our relationship. But like you said, a healthy relationship and a godly relationship, if you're Christian, is a safe space where you both will fail. But instead of attacking and doing all these things, you guys create a space where you can figure out what's the root of this. There's a root, but I will say with all of that, I think what do you even say healthy relationship is? Well, it's two people who are not only willing to choose each other, but that are willing to take accountability for their life and work towards healthiness, despite the trauma that they've been through, despite where they come from. And that does not mean it's going to be perfect, because they always say, I remember I read this one like Christian book or like article on marriage, and it was like, marriage is a reflection of yourself. It's like looking in the mirror. So many things get exposed in you that you didn't even know were there, because when you're in a relationship, it really pulls things out of you that you did not see. Like, because when you're walking in life by yourself, it's really easy to kind of just go, and you feel like, I went through that, and I've shared that before. Like before David, I'd been in therapy for almost like 2 years, working on myself, getting to a healthy place, and I was like, I'm healed, like I'm good to go.
And then
like,
you get in a relationship, you're like, oh my gosh.
No, I'm like, I love Jesus. I know my identity. Like I'm so good. And then I get into my relationship, and it was like, oh, holy crap. All this is bringing up a lot for me that I haven't worked through. And he was so patient with me as I worked through that. And I also was patient with him as he learned how to even be in a relationship and work through everything he's also been through. And it's a process, and we still are. But I don't want people to think that, I feel like that's always tossed around, like, oh, toxic relationship into a healthy one. And I'm like, I'm sorry. Relationships all are hard. There's always mistakes. There's always things. But I feel like what really defines like a healthy relationship is, like I said, two willing people that are choosing each other, and also people that are willing to take accountability and take action and try to pursue healthiness. But obviously you have to be patient with each other and stuff. But I want to tap a little bit more into kind of, like you said, the relationship anxiety that we kind of both experienced, I think, in the beginning of our relationship, and maybe some ways you feel like you've gotten out of it. So first tell me, like, in a small version, like, what do you feel like was some of the relationship anxiety that you experienced?
I feel that I didn't talk about this, but after I was in a 3.5-year relationship, I was in a 4-month relationship that was super traumatic for me, and it led me to Jesus. And I had I think I developed relationship anxiety in that relationship because because I went from a relationship that was 3.5 years, always talking, always together, living together, constantly texting, calling. I could leave the house, call, like always talking, to this relationship where the guy I was dating wouldn't call. We were in a relationship saying I love you, and he wouldn't call me for like 9 hours or text me for 9 hours, and he would go on a bike ride and not tell me where he was, and it just really messed with my head. And then I felt kind of crazy in that relationship, and we just had really different communication styles, obviously. Right. But and then he broke up with me super traumatically out of nowhere. We were, technically, now looking back, I was in lust, not really in love, but I had my whole identity in that relationship. It took me 5 years to get over it. It was really traumatic, and I had to go to therapy. I went to counseling, inner healing. I was just, I don't know, it was really traumatic for me. And so I think I brought some of those tendencies of that anxious attachment into my relationship with Tyler. And like you said, that was actually healing for me. I've never heard that, of saying, Tyler isn't my ex. Like, I know that, and we've worked through that, but I think at the beginning of our relationship, I didn't. So if he didn't text me in the morning, or if he didn't text me for 3 or 4 hours, I was like, he doesn't love me, he doesn't care about me, he's not thinking about me, he doesn't, all these things. And I would actually go into full spirals. It was very odd.
My therapist calls it catastrophizing.
No, yeah, like I would literally hysterically cry in the morning and call my best friend and be like, he hasn't talked to me since till noon, and I get a good morning text from him at 1, and he's like, good morning, babe. And then I'm, all of a sudden I just feel this rush of like anxiety leave my body. Yeah. And I also, I'm sure it stemmed from childhood. My dad, the way he died, and the way my dad died when I was 19, and the way he died was super traumatic. And just my sister's, it's really interesting. My sister's also anxious, and if we don't text her back in a couple hours, she's like anxious. And so I think that that's just how I grew up, and that's how I felt that love was supposed to be communicated, was through always talking and this and that. And so yeah, it was tough, and Tyler and I had to work through that. Now he texts me in the morning, but we live together. But honestly, now it's so weird because we're married, and I'm so safe, and I'm not, dating's weird because you don't know what's happening. Dating is weird. You know what I mean?
It's stressful.
It's stressful. Yeah. You don't know what's happening, really. But now I don't care if he doesn't talk to me for a whole day. I'm not worried he's gonna fall off the planet Earth and never talk to me again. Because that's what happened with my ex. It was like, he was just like, one day, I love you so much, and then the next day literally blocked me on Facebook, blocked me on Instagram. I was like, how do you go from this to that? And so I think abandonment and just fear of losing someone you love and putting your whole life into someone, and that's really where I had to just continue to grow in my faith with God, and just keep giving myself to God, and not idolizing Tyler to fill this void or this fear in my heart. And it was really tough for me. So I guess a way that mediated it was I had a friend that I could call. That was important for me at that time. And I also would just try to go to God, and honestly just having those conversations with Tyler and growing our relationship, and just sometimes just time is the best medicine, like going through it, and just letting your body about each other. And letting your body heal, because it's in your body, and anxiety is not something you can help. It just happens, and it's not like I can just be like, stop being anxious, it's you start to spiral. And so I think it's just, I was learning how to become safe in my body, safe with Tyler, when I was feeling anxious, just teaching myself I'm okay, self-talk type of stuff, listening to worship or going and doing something. But it was very tough, I think, for our first year for me, because he was so sweet. Like, he would call me and be like, hi babe, I love you so much, and then I would answer the phone and be like, where were you all morning? He's like, are you okay? I'm like, no. I'm not actually.
Unpacking all the drama.
Where are my flowers? That's another thing I'd love to talk about quickly if we have time, is love languages in relationships.
Yeah, it's important.
And how some people are different than you.
Yeah.
Tyler and I have very different love languages, and still to this day in our marriage, it's hard.
Well, it's funny because you love someone the way that you want to be loved.
Yes.
So typically, like with your love language, you will give the way you want to receive.
Totally.
But often what you want to receive is not the way that they want to receive.
Yeah.
And so it's like opposite.
Yes.
So you have to figure out how that person receives love.
Yeah. And also sometimes I think that's good, but then also I've had to learn, because I've told Tyler, this is how I love to be loved. This is what I need. And he literally, like, he can't. Like, he just like malfunctions. Like, he's gotten better, but he will literally set like reminders on his phone, like alarms on his phone, calendar things, like go get her flowers. But he loves me so unconditionally in so many other ways. And so I've had to learn, hey, he loves me, and to appreciate those things,
but that,
and to feel filled by that.
That is so important. I want to touch on that. I hate to cut you off, but that is something that the biggest difference I've noticed in my relationship with David versus my past relationships is that you think, you know, love bombing, all the things, you guys know all the things, toxic relationships, like you have this fairy tale idea of love in your mind, and let me tell you, a healthy relationship is not
and
that.
Social media is so ugly
it's just not that. And like,
it's not that.
Your boyfriend getting you flowers every day and doing this, and you deserve that. Like, no, do you know what you deserve? You deserve someone who consistently makes you feel safe, seen, loved. And it's not up and down and up and down. You deserve something that's almost kind of boring and stable. I'm sorry, but that is healthy love.
True.
Like, I remember when I first started dating David, I was like, this is unfamiliar.
It's
like,
so normal.
Are we in love? What's happening? Like, it just felt very consistent and safe. And it took me a really long time to feel like I was just like really in it. Because the beginning, it was so different from what I knew. What I knew was this whirlwind, huge butterflies, anxiety, is this person gonna call me, like all this emotion, all this intensity. And then with David, it was always just very slow and steady. The way he loved me and the way he showed up for me, and what he did is he was consistent. It was all these things, and eventually I started to feel my body kind of come out of this panic mode and just feel like, oh, okay. And so it's just crazy how we think love is supposed to be this thing, and it's like, truly, I believe like a good healthy relationship is just really steady, it's consistent. Not to say that there's not going to be lows and you know, things, but if you're constantly having like lows and highs, that's not like what, you know, because that's also another thing with codependency, kind of like you said with your ex, you kind of grow this like desire to be like you're hurt by them, but then they're the only ones who can fix it. It's like they're stabbing you with the knife, but then like you have to let them like fix you up.
I remember when and I love all this, and I want to touch on that, but I remember when my ex cheated on me in the 3.5 year one. It was like, he cheated, and then he was crying. He rolled off the bed and is crying on the floor. He's like, I'm so sorry. I'm like, crying. And then I just was like, well, he's really the only thing that could make me feel better, you know? And so I was like, it's fine, you know? You just like tried to make out with my best friend, but it's cool, God. You know? And then and then we were just back to normal. Crazy. It's like so sad.
You need to look into this. You guys need to look into this too. The abuse cycle. My therapist showed me this before, but it's like the incident occurs, the abuser makes the victim feel like it never happened, and then makes him feel bad or something. I need to look it up, but it's like done. And then after you get abused, they make you feel like it didn't happen. So once you feel like it didn't happen, they're upset, and then you have to comfort them. And then that's exactly you go into this honeymoon stage. And I don't know exactly, guys.
Good. No, it's true.
You need to look it up. But look up the abuse cycle, guys. Anyone who's listening to this, it's crazy because it's the circle. What happens is you go through this whole instant, and then pretty much it goes away, pretends like it never happened. And then you get to this honeymoon stage where, because the relationship is so chaotic and because you never feel safe, you will do anything to just feel like everything's okay. So you literally ignore what just happened, and then you have this like fake honeymoon stage that like everything's you feel good
because he's on edge too. He's like, I don't want to like piss her off because let me just get her flowers, or let me do this, or let me take her to dinner, or whatever.
It's just crazy. I was talking about this with, I can't remember who it was, but I was like, I won't name names, I won't say what, but in one of my past relationships, like I would literally, I don't think I can get into it. I really want to.
No, it's crazy.
I won't. But I will say, in one of my past relationships, I won't say what, but when I found out I was being cheated on, he told me, I'll never forget this. By the way, I found out, and it had happened months prior, and I hadn't known. And he told me, as I started to cry, you know, and talk to him about it, he said, you don't need to make me feel bad for something I already forgave myself for. And in that moment,
that's like gaslighting.
I know.
And you were like, you're right.
I was like, you're literally right. No,
I'm so sorry. I'm sorry.
Something like that would happen, and then I would like find myself going and getting ice cream with him. And I'm like,
that's how it was. I get it.
How did we get here?
Yeah.
Like, what is happening?
Yeah.
Which is a whole nother thing. But it is really crazy and really beautiful to see what God has done in our lives.
Yes.
And similarly to you, like Tyler's a redemption for you.
Yes.
And similarly for me with David, it is a very similar situation to my marriage.
Yeah, that's also such a
God
trip.
Redeemed it. And it's crazy, Emily B, because I remember the first day that I met you, we were talking and you were like, I told you a little bit about my divorce and everything.
I remember this.
And you said, this is your redemption story, Nicole. You literally looked at me and said that.
Amen.
And I was like, oh, and like it literally has been.
Because it's literally copy paste but counterfeit.
No, I know.
Like the prior was counterfeit. It's like, but it's
crazy because at the time it was so prophetic what you said. And you guys know I'm very like skeptical about all that. But it was so prophetic what you said, because at the time David really hadn't even done music.
Yeah,
like he was just started trying to do music. And you found out about my divorce and you were like, this is literally redemption for you. This is this is God redeeming it. He's literally going to twist it and turn it around. And then obviously shortly thereafter, David's music career blew up. Yeah. And I was in the same exact situation, feeling insecure, scared, like, oh no, I'm in the same situation. Like, why would God put me in this situation again? I don't want to do this.
David was so affirming to you. That was the cutest thing. I remember he would say the same thing that I was saying about it. He was like, if God, I remember talking to him, he's like, well, obviously, like, this was Nicole's past and now it's crazy. Like, I literally have the same amount of siblings as him. Like, they're like, saying all this like stuff. He's like, it's obvious that God like put us together and that this is happening.
Such a redemption story.
It's so redemptive. And,
but I didn't want it because it was so uncomfortable for me. Like, I was like, I want to be safe. I want to, like, if I ever get married again, if I ever date again, I used to tell God, like, I never thought I was going to, but if I did, I was like, I will marry the guy who works at
finance
like Wells Fargo, 9 to 5.
No, not for you,
good looking.
Honey.
Like, I just want the most safe guy. And
even though that's great,
David, this heartthrob who's so cutie, but obviously hadn't done music yet or hadn't had success with it. And then his career blows up. Every woman wants him, and I'm like, here I am again in this situation. Yeah. But that's what's beautiful is like, I have to give it to God. And more than trusting David, it's not even about that. It's about trusting God and being like, okay, like, you brought me into this and I believe that you will bring me out of it. But the enemy's real and there's temptation and there's distraction and there's destruction. But God,
Jesus in the center.
Jesus, yes.
Keep Jesus in the center.
Amen, sister. And now you're like married.
I am married.
She's a married woman.
I'm a married woman.
And you guys work through that.
The love languages, or
the love languages and the relationship anxiety.
Yeah, anxiety is good. Love languages we're still figuring out.
But Tyler's it's a process.
Really good. No, I just think it's just learning each other. And something I want to talk about is, we have recognized that I come from trauma, and my whole family line is like trauma. And now the Lord's redeemed my family too, like my mom and my sister and stuff like that. But then also Tyler has stuff too in his family. And we're like, okay, the Lord's put us together and now we're building our own family and our own selves and separating
new life.
And I believe in like breaking off all soul ties, everything.
Yeah.
Some Christians are like, soul ties don't exist.
Amen.
Okay, well, I do believe that because I literally had one.
I was like, Jesus, break off my soul tie,
I was
please.
like, break this off. Even to this day, and this is like something that we want to Tyler and I want to talk about is like, oh my gosh, this is a whole thing, but really it's not like, I don't even know if I've talked to you about this.
I don't think so.
Okay, how do I even explain this? The enemy will try to attack your marriage, and there has been so much stuff with our exes that have come up in our marriage, even to the day we got married. I talked to Abby about this stuff and like other people. It's crazy. The enemy is trying to kill, whatever, destroy all those things. And just the other day, it was like, I was literally praying. I was like, Lord, I want all this gone. You think it's gone, and then you get married and you have sex, and then stuff comes up and you're like, whoa, I didn't realize this was here and what is happening. And vice versa for Tyler. And so anyways, my sister, sorry, this is a side note, guys, you're gonna have to listen to this. My sister says, oh, I found this box of all this old stuff of yours, you should go through it. And so I go through and I found all these like old like letters and photos of me and my ex, and I'm like crying. I'm like, what is this stuff?
Wow.
I like had to peel them up, burn them, whatever, all this stuff. I didn't burn them, but I ripped them up and threw them out. But anyways, it's just interesting. So I think marriage is just this unfolding process of deeper levels of trust with your partner, of even bringing Tyler into those things and saying like, I love you and I want you, and this stuff still is coming up and needs to continue to die.
Right. And
I don't know, I know that people struggle with that, and I know that's not talked about, but
yeah,
it's
because
like
people don't want people to assume things of their relationship. That's why it's so hard to talk about struggles that you go through, because you're like, oh, people are gonna think we're bad, people are gonna think he doesn't love me, people are gonna think, and it's like, no, we're all going through things stuff.
And
I
think for Tyler and I, and what we feel led to, because even, God, can I share this? I feel like, no, I can't actually, but even with Tyler's parents, it's like they went through some stuff as well with like past people at like 30 years later.
Wow. And
we were just like, no, we want this stuff dead, gone now, like period, end of story. And so I think we are just in this continuous refining process of working through all these roots that he has, I have for my family. It's beautiful. It's so beautiful, and it's also refining. And I know that for me, I definitely got like my God ordained partner, because I do feel like God's working through us to build something completely new out of our like family bloodline. I'm the first Christian in my bloodline to marry another Christian. And
praise Jesus.
Yeah, it's just like so
That's
cool.
awesome.
So we're just, going in it.
Yeah, and you're having to break off all the generational trauma and curses and all the things that are tied to it. Yeah,
and like he grew up in a Christian household. Yeah, but there was still stuff. He struggled with porn growing up, and all these things, and we don't want those things for our kids. Yeah, and so we're just working through that together and with God, and it's been so beautiful.
It's a lot of work.
It's a lot. Yeah, you're just like, whoa. Yeah, I don't know. I didn't realize this was going to come up.
Yeah, I mean, I can't say I fully understand, because I wasn't in a very mutual marriage, but I was married, and I know that there is like, it is very exposing of a lot of things, and it is, but it's beautiful, because I think that's one of the most beautiful things about marriage, is that I do feel like it's so designed by God, because it does truly bring you to be the best version of yourself, more like Jesus, more selfless, and really work through these nitty-gritty things with a safe person. And I think that that's super beautiful and amazing. So I think it's obviously complicated and hard, but I think it's so special.
There's this pastor that Tyler and I used to listen to called Judah Smith, and he's the church home pastor, and he has this thing called like Better at 70. Like, it's like every year you're working towards just being the better version of who God created you to be. And as a wife, as a husband, like, I think people assume that you go into marriage knowing everything. Yeah. But just like you said, when you started dating David, it's like a new relationship. Well, when you get into marriage, it's a whole new relationship. Yeah, absolutely. It's a whole new foundation. You're building on just new. Yeah. And so I feel that's not talked about a lot. And so I think a lot of couples, I don't know the divorce rate, but I do think that, I know that within the first 2 years is like the hardest time for people, because, and Tyler and I we'll be making a YouTube about this separately, but our first year of marriage is like, you just go through so many things that you don't go through when you're dating.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know? So, but
it's a lot.
Yeah, we love it though. It's a blessing, you know? We're just like,
but
wow.
It's good. It's important that someone's talking about it, which is why, like, not only do I love you and I relate to you, but I think in this space online, it's so cool to have you on here, because I think, you know, for anyone who's watching who doesn't know Emily, she's so honest, so vulnerable, and you've always been that way, and you share the truth even if it's ugly. And a lot of stuff in the Christian community, I feel like, is very glamorized and you know, covered up and cleaned up before it's shared, because you don't want to be judged. And I think that's going to be really special to see you and Tyler really speak on marriage and speak on all that goes into it, because it's not talked about.
It's not. And we needs to be. We're like, I mean, you see, like, we are fully called to be together, and we are so in love with each other.
But those can coexist. Like, no, I think people don't think that.
I just feel like it's people, there's exactly what you're saying. It's like cookie cutter. It's like if you share anything, it's like, oh, they must hate each other.
Yeah, no, but those things coexist. Like, you can love one another and be in a deeply beautiful, healthy sanctified relationship, and also be working through some serious trauma and things that you've like. It's so complex. And that's just how it is. But that's what I think is cool, is it's like, marriage isn't like you get together and you're happily ever after, like, and it's yay
and everything's great and you have kids.
It like, actually produces growth.
It does.
But there's pain.
And if you hide that, truthfully, seriously, if anyone's listening to this and you have shame or you're hiding something from your partner, tell them. Talk about it. Communication is the number one thing you can do in any relationship. Tell them what you're struggling with, because the more you bring it to the light, the more you can heal. And so Tyler and I talk about everything.
Well, and that's like important in a healthy relationship.
Stuff. Like, we're just like, I don't care. Like, if I have a thought, we're talking about it. You know, it is what it is. But here we are.
Yeah, and I think that's something that, you know, for anyone watching this, which we talked a lot about, like unhealthy relationships, you do need to find a space and a partnership that allows you the space to talk. I think that's like one of the biggest differences that I felt in my relationship with David, is that I can bring up something that he's done or that I feel or weigh or whatever, or something that I'm just feeling.
And never feel shame.
And he never makes me feel crazy. He never makes me feel like there's something wrong with me. And it's a safe space, you know, and it doesn't mean that neither of us get hurt, but there's a safe space. And so, we could talk forever, but I'm so thankful that you came on and that you shared your heart and obviously some of our relationship stuff. And just anyone who's watching this, I know this was kind of jumbled and stuff, but just if you've been through hardship, if you've been through unhealthy relationships, if you don't know your worth, if you don't feel like you love yourself enough to walk out of a toxic relationship, if you don't even know what a healthy relationship is, what a toxic relationship is, like, we love you, and it's complicated and it's complex. And if you feel like you're in a messy situation, if you feel like you don't know, like, I just want you to feel heard and seen. And if you have allowed yourself to be treated certain ways and you don't know how to leave and all these things, find your identity in this person. And if you related to anything that we said, relationship anxiety, fear, PTSD, like, I just hope you guys know that you're not alone and that these things are so normal and they happen to so many people. And there is healing and there is good love out there, but it's messy and it takes a lot of work, and it takes time, and it also takes trusting the Lord, and you know, whatever you believe in. Obviously, if there's anyone on here who isn't a believer, I hope you all relate to this too. But I just want to share that, and I'm so thankful for you, Emily, and I just kind of want to leave the floor to you if there's anything you want to share before we close out.
I just feel like there is always more. There's always new, and you're always growing, and it's continuous. If I look back at my life 10 years ago, I would never think I would be where I'm at right now. And I just think that just allow yourself to kind of go through that process. And like Nicole said, it's also not just men, it's like friendships. Like, make sure you're surrounded with people that truly love you.
Coco's like, yes.
Truly.
What do you see? Hey, There she goes.
Truly love you and see you and like honor you and respect you for your life and your call, and just don't tolerate any people that are BS. I think that's what I've learned, truly.
The older you get, the more you're like, I don't care.
Just surround your people with that love you, that encourage you.
Anyways, but I love you, Emily. Thank you so much for coming on. Yes. I'm so blessed to know you. And guys, if you don't already follow Emily, please go and follow her. What's your user?
Emily Robbie with 2 E's.
Emily Robbie. Such a cutie name. She's an actress. She also is. Hi. Are you still starting a podcast?
Yes, we had a podcast, but then
you're starting it back up.
Yeah, I think we're like YouTube more, but podcast. A little bit of both.
Yep. Amazing. Go and subscribe and follow along on all her journeys and all her things. I'll link everything of her down below. So I love you so much, Em, and I love you guys. And you guys know how I close out every episode. I will close this out by saying, what elephants are in your room? My name is Nicole, and I will talk to you guys in 2 weeks.
Bye.
Bye.